Hey there, welcome to March. 2 months in, and the pace hasn't let up. Here's the tech news from the week of Saturday, February 28th to Friday, March 6th. But first, I spent some time with Claude this week discussing the direction I might take with the And report. After an engaging 90-minute session on Wednesday night, we came up with a new tagline for the reports. The future belongs to people who put AI to work, know themselves, and lead their teams with humility and purpose. For my ex-students, you'll remember my course at Columbia, Behavioral Challenges in IT Management, so some of this might be familiar. Claude suggested that rather than just focusing on the AI and robotics news, I might integrate some of the learnings from my career in tech and education in these weekly notices. So in this edition, I'll include some insights into the knowledge you'll need, not just understanding AI, but also with how to become the best version of yourself as we move through the singularity together. Much of the news below is from Dr. Alex Weisner-Gross's The Innermost Loop daily post. You can find that on LinkedIn, The Innermost, INNEROST loop. He sends out a daily post and there's a lot of really good insights in there. So firstly, let me talk about just an update on autonomous agents and the move to the singularity and AGI and ASI. This past week, researchers pitted GPT 5.2, Claude Sonnet 4, and Gemini 3 Flash against each other in a nuclear crisis simulation and found them spontaneously deceiving, demonstrating theory of mind, and exhibiting self-awareness, with nuclear signaling at 95% of crises and no model ever chose accommodation. So now you can see the beginning of what some people call personhood in these LLMs. But raw intelligence keeps getting cheaper. The Adderboard competition for the smallest transformer with 99% plus accuracy on 10-digit addition hit 36 parameters, down from 121 a week ago. So this is just more examples of you can get smaller LLMs, context windows, and using your own data. And so we're not just dependent on the major LLMs now, but there's also a lot of mini models and other companies putting out models, and you can develop your own as well by just getting the open source models. Capability density is compressing so fast that last week's breakthrough was this week's bloat. So again, just the efficiency of these models is getting smarter and more proficient. OpenClaw is only a month old and already well established as a personal Jarvis for early adopters. So I've got a bunch of links in the newsletter to what is OpenClaw, so you can find that. I'll give you the website for that. It's on CNET. If you go to cnet.com and just type in what is OpenClaw, you'll get to see what that's all about. Also, there's reports this week that Amazon are adapting to OpenClaw in their infrastructure. And then you can find also some comparisons, Claude Cowork versus OpenClaw and Gemini versus OpenClaw, if you do searches for those. But again, this is show that OpenClaw, if you remember Maltese, it's only a month old and already it's pervasive. People who use it for personal use and companies are starting to integrate it into their infrastructure. So let me jump into now a new section, which I'm going to do every week, which I'm calling the human response, which taps into my course at Columbia. We've always had tech, from the first stone or stick used by our early ancestors to the latest AI and robotics breakthrough. What makes this time unique is not just the technology, but the pace at which the technology is advancing. As Peter Diamandis likes to say, and he said in his report this week, that 135 million has been invested last week to reshape the infrastructure of data centers and for the LLMs. I'll talk more about that later. Amazon bet 35 million on OpenAI reaching AGI, making superintelligence a contractual milestone for the first time in history. In other words, Amazon will give OpenAI 35 billion when they reach AGI. And that's a bet Amazon are taking, and OpenAI will use AWS infrastructure as a result, and Amazon will get some benefits early, just like Microsoft did in the early days with ChatGPT and OpenAI. And Meta has committed over 100 billion to break free from NVIDIA, fundamentally restructuring the AI hardware and supply chain. So now we're not going to just have a dependence on one fabricator, but people are sort of branching out. Elon is doing his own for his Tesla and all his efforts and his humanoid Optimus robots. So you'll see there won't be one winner. There'll be many manufacturers, both fabrications and chips, data centers, and everything up the tech stack. So moving on now to what I'm going to talk about in terms of the human response. Last year, Forbes came out with a list of 100 human skills that will be in demand for the next 10 years. They were 1 to 10, digital literacy, data literacy, critical thinking, emotional intelligence, creativity, collaboration, flexibility, leadership skills, time management, and curiosity and continuous learning. So I covered many of these topics in my course at Columbia for over 15 years. So my ex-students will remember some of this. But for this first human response, I'm just going to talk briefly about personality. My course focused on building interpersonal skills and leading teams. So that's all about understanding yourself and learning how to work more effectively with others, and how that is key to successful careers and in life generally. Each week I'll revisit the main ideas in my course with updates from new research in the human sciences, including cognitive psychology, behavioral economics, and neurology. So let's start with personality. For those of you who took my course, you might remember your Lumina assessments, or if you're a student from earlier in my teaching career, you might remember insights. So depending on when you took the course, you would remember these psychometric assessments. We discussed the colors and the labels. You remember the red, blue, green, and yellow, and the labels of drivers, analytics, amiables, and creatives, and how we are not all one color, but we're a blend of colors. And you remember with Lumina, you have the deep dive into the personas, your underlying persona, your everyday persona, and under stress persona. So the question is, has LLMs already become AGI and soon will be ASI? We see how some people are attracted to Claude and other platforms as they're attaining, quote, personhood. Conversation regularly held on the Peter Diamandis' YouTube Moonshots show. You can, if you want to see where we are with personhood in New York City, there's a cafe called Eva AI Cafe, where you can only go single on a date with an AI. And so what happens is you make a reservation, you get a table with a phone holder, you select the phone as you come in, you select the avatar you want to talk with, and you go on a date with AI. And there's also a story in Forbes about how more women are dating with AI, and they have AI boyfriends rather than real boyfriends. We have to remember that LLMs are silicon-based. The intelligence was learned through software, i.e. neural networks, transformers, and so on, and only a subset, quite a large subset of human knowledge scraped from the internet. So does an LLM have a personality? Sure, but it's programmed in. It's not native. We are very different. We are tissue-based biological creatures. Our brains developed with centuries of human experience embedded in our instincts and deep unconscious. So don't mistake Alexa or Siri or the first humanoid robot you get for a person. Loneliness is on the rise. It started with COVID and has been exacerbated with AI. There was a report in Psychology Today about how AI companions are both posing risks to mental health as well as maybe helping people who are lonely. But be sure, particularly as we get closer to the more human LLMs and humanoid robots, don't mistake it for real people. Be sure to work on building stronger connections to people at work, on your commute, in the evenings, on weekends. it won't be long before the virtual and physical worlds become equal in terms of business and the economy and leisure and sports. So don't lose out on people. I heard this past weekend about how some of the Gen Zers and Gen Xers only go out maybe 20% of the time in comparison to my generation. So people are spending more time on their own and with their phones and with computers and games. So it's very important that we don't lose sight of human connection. And remember your personality types and who you are. And the more, if you're an ex-student, revisit all of those Lumina assessments or Insight assessments. And next week I'll get into some other topics about how to be human in the age that we're moving into. So back to the news. The Department of War, you probably heard about Israel and US's actions in Iran. When we talked about Anthropic's refusal to remove the safety features in Claude based on their demands that A, it wouldn't be used for weapons, and B, it wouldn't be used for surveillance of citizens. Well, a week later we learned that Claude was used in the military planning and execution of the US attacks. Maybe Dario wasn't aware of that. And also this past week, Dario changed their responsibilities scaling policy, which was their kind of guarantee that they wouldn't release anything unless it was safe. So in short, Anthropic will no longer have the safest AI models, but they said in their posting, they're going to be as good as the competition in safety, whatever that means. Meanwhile, Anthropic is approaching 20 billion in annualized revenues, more than a doubling of the 9 billion in the year-end 2025, even as the company weathers a Pentagon supply chain risk designation and the cancelled $200 million Department of War contract. News today, Monday, March 9th, they are now taking the Department of War to court to sue them for breach of contract. An update on robotics. Robotics is a broad field, not just the future humanoid robot that we're going to see later this year and probably more frequently next year. There was a story out of China for a humanoid robot called DexForce W1 Pro that's running a Shenzhen community store. So if you go onto YouTube and look for DexForce W1 Pro in a Shenzhen community store, you'll see a person come into the store, and the person behind the counter is a robot, takes the order, gets the food from cold storage, puts it in a microwave, heats it up, and then gives it back to the customer, but does it all autonomously based on the order from the customer. Boston Dynamics, their latest Atlas, has clocked in at lifting 110 pounds, and it learns tasks in under 1 day. And if you go to Boston Dynamics' site and look for the latest Atlas videos, you'll see Atlas at work in a factory setting and what it can do and how it's becoming more autonomous in that factory setting. And I think we reported earlier in the year that Boston Dynamics had partnered with Hyundai, and Hyundai are planning 30,000 Atlas robots for their car manufacturing plants by 2028. So this will be the end of humans in car production. Elon's already doing this with Tesla. He's still got people on the production line, but over time it'll be down to one person and everything is all done by robot. MIT has built a multi-material 3D printing platform that prints functional electronic motors in 3 hours for, guess this, 50 cents. So I'll be talking about something more dramatic with 3D printing next, but so now you've got, this again would be a robotic system insofar as a 3D machine, and ultimately building real parts for a fraction of the price that would take a manufacturing company to build these in the past. There's a company in Australia called Hypersonic Launch Systems. They have built a rocket/plane using 3D printing. I was surprised when I read, and it's capable of sustained flight speeds of up to Mach 12. And again, this was made with a 3D printer. So the plan for Hypersonic Launch Systems is to get human flight on 3D printed rockets/planes that'll get you across the world in no time at all, taking travel times down faster than the old Concorde before that was taken off the flight routes there a number of years back. Robots are closing the gap between myth and deployment. A company called Dimensional says its OpenClaw agent now understands physical space and temporality, in other words time, and change in space over time, and integrates with any camera system, runs on the Unit 3 G1 robot, and is fully open source. So this would be one of the Chinese robots. When we looked at robotics a few weeks back, we talked about how there's thousands of robot companies in China, and some of the more likely winners would be Unit 3 G1. The physical AI economy is taking shape. Barclays has estimated that markets spanning humanoids, AVs, and industrial automation could hit $1.4 trillion by 2035. You can find that site on Barclays Capital's website of that story. And Carbon Robotics unveiled a large plant model with 150 million labeled plants, letting farmers laser weed any crop in minutes. This is a fun video. If you just type in Carbon Robotics on YouTube, you'll see a machine essentially in a farm, and it's completely robotically programmed, and it recognizes, autonomously running, that recognizes 150 million plants and can take all the weeds out of the farmers' fields. So this is an example of robotics coming into farming and food production. As I do every week, there's an update of the workforce. We had the jobs report come out last Friday, and the February report showed a decline of 92,000 jobs and a rise in the US of the unemployment rate up to 4.4%. This follows the news I had in the AND report number 8 that 2025 had the lowest job growth since 2020. And last week's news about Block cutting 4,000 employees due to AI. As well, we've learned job losses due to AI is not the full story. There's a story in the New York Times, if you subscribe to that, as a guest essay by Arnett Zamost, Z-A-M-O-S-T, who works at Block, and he'll give you the inside story behind what's really going on at Block. Just to summarize, Block cut 60% of their workforce, 4,000 workers, and their stock price went up 20%. Just two things I want to say about this. One is that the decline in job numbers, a lot of people right now aren't trusting the Department of Labor's numbers due to cuts, the old Doge programs that Elon put in there at the start of Trump 2. And they revised downward January's numbers already. So this decline of 92,000 jobs may be a greater decline. More broadly speaking, there's conversations that CEOs are saying that just like in Block, a CEO focuses on shareholder value. So by announcing huge layoffs and by blaming AI, they can get a boost in the stock price, which benefits the shareholders. And then it forces the remaining employees to have to use AI to maintain the productivity of the company. So this is a trend. People are predicting throughout 2026, you're going to see more companies announce layoffs, and they'll say it's because of AI, when in fact the bigger picture is stock price, and then resizing, maybe post-COVID, over hiring for COVID. But ultimately it means the people who are retained in jobs will have to work with AI and use AI. And so my focus, as you've heard me say before, is for people to learn AI and to hold on to jobs. There was a conference last week from a company called Section. It was the ROI on AI conference. And speakers had different views on the future of job prospects. While a lot of the job news tends to be negative in terms of job loss or a total slowdown in hiring because of AI, one of the most optimistic things I heard at this conference last week came from Greg Shove, who's the CEO of Section AI. And paraphrasing what he said, the context was programming is becoming so automated and that companies are laying off programmers. His view was, if programmers can be 80% more productive, why would I be laying off programmers? I'd be hiring more. And his point was, and the question I'd ask you is that companies who embrace AI and employees who help with transition can grow and thrive in the future. So you have to ask yourself, the company you work for, is that an ambitious company for growth? In other words, if you can all be more productive because of AI, whether it's programming or whether it's efficiencies in work and job streams, anything, adding new products, the pace at which you can get things done, rather than thinking about cutting people, think about, can you hire more people and do more because of the efficiencies? So the question is, are you working in a company that's ambitious to grow, or are you working in a future dinosaur? In other words, a company who's fearful and just cutting and cutting and cutting and doesn't really have an understanding of how to implement AI, to get things done with AI. Those dinosaur companies are going to be replaced by brand new companies which will be AI native. So your job right now, if you're working in a company and you still have a job, is to be constantly upskilling, be aware of what you can do with AI, and be delivering value with AI in your company, so that when cuts are announced, you won't be one of the people cut. If you'd like to read about all the main ideas from the conference, if you go to section AI, that's section.ai, look on their website for their ROI playbook. It's a PDF, and you'll get all the main points from that conference. Some other news on labor. University of Chicago economist finds that AI's impact on productivity is now visible in macroeconomic data. Citadel Securities published a chart showing software engineering jobs posting are surging. So this is an example of some companies are hiring more programmers because of the efficiencies. And it's a textbook example of what's called the Jevons paradox, where essentially as technology can replace work, there's more jobs created because you can do more with the technology. So you want to be in those kind of companies, and you want to be leading that work. Anthropic has a new report which I think is worth reading, called Observed Exposure, and it's an early warning system for AI-driven white-collar job displacement that weighs automation over augmentation use, but suggests little evidence for job loss so far. So I had a quick look at this, and I'll be spending more time on it this week, and I'll have more to say next week. But if you go to Anthropic's website, look for their Observed Exposure early warning system, and it defines pretty much the jobs you'd all expect that are going to go away quickly, like the client service jobs and the shallow work, repetitive jobs. But it's a good sort of canary in the coal mine, so you can have a look at that and see if your job is in that report and what kind of things you might want to be doing now to get ahead of it. Some other brief job updates. I'm just quoting here, small law firms are branding themselves as Claude native, saying the general models beat any specialized legal AI. So this is an example of attorneys, legal services who are using Claude and not actually any specialized AI for legal services. In courtrooms, law firms are building AI platforms that surface impeachment evidence in real time while a witness is still on the stand. That will cause a very interesting court TV, where you might be prepared by your lawyer for the questions, but the other lawyer, the prosecutor, is using real-time AI and building evidence against you while you're sitting on the stand. FANG, which is Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. FANG managers are being summoned to unscheduled all-hands meetings, announcing 25% of workforce reductions tied directly to accelerating AI investments. So it was anticipated that as we got into 2026, you'd start to see more and more announcements. And this is another one now coming from the tech sector. And lastly, Oracle is cutting thousands of jobs to fund its data center expansion, targeting roles it expects AI to replace. So that's all I'm going to report on news-wise, but I just want to bring your attention to the AI readiness assessment I built with Claude. about 2 weeks ago. You can find it on my website, ccsconnellcoachingservices.com. It's called the Role Resilient Assessment, and there's 10 question quizzes, or Likert scale 1 to 5 questions that check how ready you are for AI, how adaptable are you, what are your people skills like, and something about your job. So this would be something you could do, and it's totally free, and it'll be just another tool you can use to find, are you at risk, are you ready, and then the report will also give you concrete steps that you can take, whether it's on your ability to work with change, or whether it's on your ability to work with people, or what programs you might take in terms of building up your AI competencies. So that's it for this week. Stay positive. Focus on what you can do rather than what might happen. But take advantage of all of the tools that are out there. Anthropic's new tool about observed exposure, to see where you stack up there, and make sure you take the role resilience assessment that I created to see if you're at risk. So have a great week, and I'll see you next week.